So you just got Jing and you want the best light cone for your damage. Hold up before you buy that battle pass light cone. And one very quick important thing, don't skip this. We're using the same gear on Jing outside of the different light cones for this demonstration. So he's going to have the gear that he needs to facilitate his damage. The only change is the light cones themselves. And to make it easy for you to follow along, we're going to be showing you the baseline number for one of the cones, and then every other cone afterwards is going to have a damage percent increase versus that light cone. So with that out of the way, the first thing we're going over is single target scenarios with Jing, and our first baseline card is an S1 breakfast with no stacks. Now the breakfast card does give you damage up all the time, but will then give you an increase in attack every time you defeat an enemy. At no stacks, this is going to be around 230,000 damage, is going to be our baseline card here as well. If you do gain stacks on the S1 card, 5%, S5 no stacks, 7%, S1 Birth of Self, which we'll touch on in a minute, 8%, 12% is Peaceful Day S1, which is the Battle Pass card, and then S5 Breakfast with full stacks, 19%, S5 Birth of Self, 24, Peaceful Day S5, 28, and then we have Before Dawn S1 and S5 at 44 and 77% damage increases over our baseline of the S1 no stacks breakfast. And so looking at this, it's pretty clear that breakfast is a pretty strong card, and it does gain a little bit of extra value when you have those stacks, which is kind of hard to do in single target scenarios. So if you're looking at this list, a lot of single target scenarios, if they're actual single target, you're not going to be defeating any enemies, you won't be gaining these stacks. However, a lot of the content, including stuff like, well, Memories of Chaos, you are going to have a couple of different enemies, even in these big single target focused scenarios, which are going to allow you to gain these stacks for your Jing. So don't write off the stacking of this card as a thing that can't happen when you're fighting bigger boss monsters. Usually you're going to have some adds there for you to take care of and stack your stacks. What I do want to touch on though is the Peaceful Day card. Now this is the Battle Pass card. So when you see the S5 version of Peaceful Day being very strong in a lot of different scenarios, you literally can't gain access to an S5 Peaceful Day for months at a time, because this is the Battle Pass card and you need to go through 5 battle passes to even gain access to this damage increase. So if you have some breakfasts laying around and you're focused on some single target scenarios, Peaceful Day is going to give you that 12% damage increase over an S1 breakfast. However, if you have a couple of breakfasts laying around and you do have the stacks, or maybe you don't have the stacks, you could forego buying Peaceful Day just to use your breakfast in these single target scenarios. And then obviously if you have access to his own card, Before Dawn, well, it's just kind of crazy. And this card actually will gain even more value as your build gets better, because it does have some crit damage on it. And while this is a very strong stat in this simulation, we don't have capped crit chance on our Jing because we're using gear that isn't god tier gear. So as you get even better gear for your Jing, this crit damage increase is going to increase your damage even more, because you're gonna be landing, well, more critical hits. And Birth of Self is a very good card here as well, because, well, you do a lot of follow-up attacks with the Lightning Lord, which is why it can rank so highly in this list of good light cones for Jing. So for single target scenarios, you're now armed with the best cones for the single target. Any other cones that you didn't see there are going to be below that baseline. So just go pick up a level 1 refinement breakfast if you don't have anything else. And I absolutely do not want this video to come off as a go get the 5-star card that is on the Jing banner that's time limited because it's a giant trap. That's not what I want this to do, but it is what the data is showing. It is a fantastic light cone, but don't feel pressured based with math to go and get it. It's just here to help you make your own decision in Honkai Star Rail. And while his light cone is fantastic, there are other alternatives, as you can see in this video. And when you're comparing the different light cones with their numbers, remember, they're all compared to that base. But if you want to compare something like Jing's card to something else in the list, it's not exactly correct to do so, but you can just see the difference in damage percentages between those cards as well. If you do the actual math behind it, it would be slightly different, but you can get the gist of it. If you have just the R1 breakfast and you want to pull the card, yeah, you're going to get like a 20-something% damage increase. But if you have an R5 breakfast and you plan on getting stacked, then the card's not going to be a 21% damage increase for you. It's going to be something like a 12 or a 10 or a 15%, depending on how many stacks you have. And I've been crunching numbers all night, so if you're finding this information useful, make sure you drop that like, leave a comment, and let me know which one you're thinking about using already. But we're not done yet. Next one we're going to be going over is AoE situations, and the baseline card this time is going to be Max Refinement Birth of Self. For this AoE scenario, we're doing all superimposition level 5 cards to save you some time. So if you have this thing maxed out, it's going to be about 480,000 damage in our 8 cycle scenario of testing, and this is going to be the baseline of 100%. So what's going to be better than Birth of Self? Well, if you have Breakfast at max stacked with Max Refinement, it's actually about 3% better at max S5 than the Birth of Self is at S5. Beating out the seriousness of Breakfast at S5 is actually Peaceful Day, being an 11% increase over our baseline here. But once again, this is S5 Peaceful Day. And so there's gonna be two things to take away from this here. We're gonna go back to this is a battle pass card, and you can't get the S5 version of this for months. You have to pick this card multiple times to get it to superimposition level 5. The other thing about seriousness of Breakfast here is that this is for AoE scenarios, so you're going to be getting all of these stacks stacked up for that increased attack in addition to that 24% damage increase. This is where the seriousness of Breakfast really shines, and you can see it here as it's able to kind of hold its own against Peaceful Day. And while a little bit worse against Peaceful Day itself, it's only 8% worse than Peaceful Day being a battle pass card versus the seriousness of Breakfast, which you can either get from the gacha or even buy out of the Hall of Memories store to get extra copies for your superimposition level. And then obviously the best one here, S1 of Before Dawn, 21% increase over our S5 Birth of Self baseline. If you have S5 of Before Dawn because pocketbooks are infinite, then it's going to be a 48% damage increase over either our Birth of Self or Breakfast stacked, which is going to be very, very strong. But if you go back and take a look at the damage increase you got from an S5 Before Dawn in a single target scenario, it was a 77% damage increase. It just goes to show you how strong some of these erudition cards are in AoE circumstances. So all in all, these are the best cards for you to use. If you didn't see some of these other ones on here, like Make the World Clamor or Genius's Repose, or even Night on the Milky Way, they're just not super great in a lot of these circumstances because, well, Night of the Milky Way revolves around you doing Weakness Break for damage increases for 1 turn, and it's a buff for the character, and it gives you stacks on AoE, all this other stuff. It's fine if you have it, but I would focus on using some of these other cards if you have access to them, especially in AoE circumstances, which Night of the Milky Way is supposed to be really good in if you have other refinements for something like Seriousness of Breakfast, or you're planning on buying multiple copies of Peaceful Day. So now that you're armed with everything you need to know about which light cone you should use, let me know which one you're using down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.